All right, welcome, Coach TK, Coach Travis. Here we go. We want to welcome you, and it's a pleasure to have you here with Olé and the audience. I know Coach Willie Diaz also recommended. He reached out to me. He's like, you know what? You got to have TK. You got to interview him. You got to have him share his journey, his strategies, what he's done. He speaks very highly of you. And when he originally sent me your info, I was like, you know what? He sounds familiar. Where have I seen this guy before? Like, I know I've seen him around somewhere. It has to be the field, of course, right? In sports. So sure enough, I reached out to you, and our paths have crossed before in the past. And obviously through the beautiful game and through sports. And, you know, catching up with you in the last few weeks has been great because I feel like your energy and your path of where you're going as a person, as a coach, is something that really aligns with us as a club. And more importantly, me as a human being, we're always trying to learn and do your best for your players and for your organization and where you're at. So I know you're going to share your journey here in a bit, but I just wanted to welcome you, and I wanted to make sure we gave you the proper intro. You know, a very knowledgeable coach and person in what he does. Coach Travis, thank you for being with us today. It's going to be a great conversation today, great interview. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into sports, coaching, playing, and the history behind, you know, Coach Travis and his legendary teams.
First off, WD, a little shout out to Willie. And also to you, Walter, for reaching out. I've done some research and so stoked about what you are doing over there and trying to do in terms of continuing to develop good people. You know, your club has a little reputation in terms of being super involved in the community and you know, the futsal league that you're using to develop and this whole family environment that you're trying to create. It's pretty awesome, you know, and I know you've got a little bomb squad that's top 5 in the nation, I think. Little girls team, and like I said the other day to you, it's a rare quality. You know, nowadays it's all about bigger is better, and so continue to do your thing, and I'm stoked and appreciative for the opportunity to be here with you. So thank you.
Appreciate that. It's a definitely a team effort. Nothing, as you know, nothing significant is done you know, on your own. You know, we're fortunate enough to have a great team and great people to work with, so appreciate that.
For sure. So a little bit about me, I guess, in terms of my journey. It actually started, I kind of a local kid, grew up in Calabasas, went to Calabasas High School, went to Moore Park College for a couple of years, ended up transferring up to San Francisco State, where I played a couple of years of soccer up there. Had some personal things take place in my life early of spring semester of my second year up there, so right after season, and decided to kind of come home and try and take care of it. So I actually dropped out of school the middle of my second semester in my second year up there. Found a job serving at a local restaurant in the area. Old high school coach walks in one night and offers me a job. And he's like, hey, I want you to come and help run this soccer camp at a small private school in Calabasas called Meadow Oaks. You know, it's 6 to 8 week gig, and I figured it's fun money. I get to be around the sport that I love, that I grew up playing, and why not, you know? And that's kind of how it all started, to be honest with you. That very first year, I met a group of 5 or 6 kids that were about 7 or 8 years old, and they were currently playing down at Balboa Park, you know, in that whole ASO region, all that good stuff. And I hit it off with this group, you know, from day one. And so each summer, this group would come back. And so by the time they got to like 10 years old or so, we had established such a good rapport with one another that the parents asked if I would be interested in coming on board and helping train them. You know, they already had a couple of coaches who were dads at the time, but they were interested in maybe getting a little bit more advanced training. So they offered me kind of a part-time gig of just training them. No game coaching, just working them out 2 or 3 days a week. And so I took that on as kind of a part-time side gig, which was awesome. Ended up going to 6 ASO all-star tournaments that summer between 10 and 11, did really well in a bunch of them. And they decided to make the jump to club at U11. right?
Yeah.
Valley United. You were playing on the A team. We kind of entered your club late, so we were the B team. And that OG team, I was so fortunate enough to take those guys from U11 all the way up to U19, which, just doesn't happen now.
Yeah.
So the first couple of years, everybody played in the El Camino Real League. And then at U13, we made the jump to Coast, which back in the day was the end all be all. U13, we played silver, got promoted, played silver elite at U14, got promoted, played gold at U15, got promoted, and finished playing premier at 16, 17, and 19. And then from that original team, because back then when you were playing premier, right, everybody was down at the polo fields. Everyone was down at one location. And so we had a couple of other, teams that were playing premier that were a year or two younger. So I had the opportunity to kind of team up with Keith West, from Cal State Northridge at the time. Mm-hmm. So as my original team, your age team, was aging out playing U19, Keith and I took on a U17 team. And then when those guys were aging out, we took on another U16 premier team. And then a few years went by, and got an opportunity to work with a really special group a handful of years later. Those guys are all late 20s now, 27, 28. So I got back in the game a little bit and ended up having a really special journey with another team at the U15 and U16 level. And then in 08 is when the academy started. We ended up finishing second in the nation, had an unbelievable journey, ended up getting the wild card from Cal South, right? We lost in the finals. So we got a wild card to Far West Regionals, which happened to be in Hawaii. Not a bad place to go play soccer. Went to Hawaii, ended up kind of shocking the world and winning Far West Regionals. And then a few weeks later, preparing to go to Little Rock, Arkansas, where we lost in the national championship final, on Sunday to the Dallas Texans. So that was my last super, super competitive team on the men's side. I came back a year later and helped out my good friend Adolfo Perez, took over one of his girls' teams that were aging out just as a favor. So I got back into that arena for a year. And that was pretty much it. Once the academy started, I had some offers, but it wasn't really appealing to me in terms of the rigor of the amount of time that was necessary. Throughout my time coaching all the club teams, I also had a fantastic full-time job as well. So my path was a little bit different. I didn't coach club out of necessity. I didn't coach club because I wanted to climb the ladder and eventually become a college coach or become a professional coach or whatever it was. I kind of got into this based off of the connection that I, had that first summer at Meadow Oaks with this unbelievably special group of kids. And it's just unbelievable, right? We talk about it all the time, the power of sport. And the opportunity that it provides people when they're not even looking, and so I was a full-time PE coach at Meadow Oaks, which was a K-8 private school in Calabasas for a little while. And then I became an athletic director for a short time. And then in 99, 2000, our neighboring school, Viewpoint, bought us out. So Viewpoint bought Meadow Oaks, and it became this massive K-12 institution. 40 plus acres, all that good stuff. I interviewed, they invited me to come over as a full-time PE teacher, and then they wanted me to kind of provide a little bit more stability on the girls soccer side. So I went over as a full-time PE coach and girls varsity head coach. A couple years later, they found out about my tennis background, offered me the girls tennis program in the fall. So now I'm coaching girls tennis program in the fall, transitioning into girls soccer in the winter, and then still dabbling in the middle school in the spring. From there, I ended up taking over the boys soccer program as well. So for a short amount of time, I was kind of the head coach of both programs. And then after that, I ended up taking over the boys tennis program. And after that, I ended up establishing kind of a counseling role with the student athletes. So I currently am an associate athletic director, director of soccer and tennis operations, head coach, and then also director of counseling for college-bound athletes. So I help all the students who are looking to play at the next level I work with them as early as 9th and 10th grade and kind of give them the blueprint, things that they can do now to get on the radar, how to go about navigating through the process. Because we are a very academic institution. So in a lot of ways, we're like that perfect fit for that D3 smaller school environment. And so a lot of the kids that we have maybe aren't playing at the highest level outside of school. So them and their parents have no idea how to navigate through, those waters when it comes to recruiting. So we created that role for myself a handful of years ago, and it's been awesome. It's kind of a little bit all over the place, but again, I think having a full-time job has allowed me the opportunity to, I think become a better coach when I'm with my team, because there's a lot more balance. And again, I'm not doing it because I have to do it. I'm doing it because I want to do it. I'm doing it because I get to do it. Massive difference in terms of mentality.
Yeah, I agree. And when someone really has, like, let's say there's a lot of coaches that have a passion for it, right? And they almost feel like when they commit to something, it's like, even if they're not happy at times, they're like, well, this is something that I want to do. And maybe they're not in the right environment, but have you always felt like where you have been was the right environment for you? Do you ever feel like, whether it's a school, whether it was the teams you were in, do you ever feel like, what, I just don't want to do this anymore at all?
It's interesting, right? And I'll talk about this later when it comes to culture and coaches and all that. So when I was working with my original team, the team that you grew up battling against, right, for 8 or 9 years, and I first started working at Viewpoint at the high school level, the difference was just, right, you go from, competing against the best of the best in the country, right? You're traveling and you're showcasing and you're doing it at the highest of levels. And then I found myself in this position where, okay, they want me to take over this program. I'm told that there are no cuts. So I've got to keep everybody. There's only one varsity program. I've got girls. I think I had one girl that played any type of like competitive soccer outside of school, and the rest kind of just did it because they had to get PE credit. Maybe they enjoyed it. Maybe they're friends. And so, to be perfectly honest, those first couple of years, I had a hard time getting out of my own way, right? And I think now, as I look back on my journey, it was the best thing for me, because that's how you get experience, right? You just go through stuff. And it was an ego thing, and it was a pride thing, and it was like a frustration thing. It's like, oh my God, I'm used to working with this level, and these guys can't even do the simple. And so it took me adjusting, and it took me growing up and maturing and kind of getting out of my own way and realizing at the end of the day, this isn't about me. This is about my ability to create something for this group. And so once I realized that I could treat them and do all the cool team building stuff that we'll talk about later that I was doing with my boys, once I started that process of implementing all of the cool team stuff and the team dinners and all that good stuff, everything changed. The culture changed, the respect level changed, my passion, my enthusiasm, which then of course led to their passion and their enthusiasm. And so it was really an instrumental period for me, serious growth, a lot of looking inward, a lot of asking those dark questions that not a lot of people like to. But it definitely helped me become a better coach, a better teacher, a better educator, a better mentor, a better everything.
Yeah. It's not easy, and self-reflecting at times, and just being able to kind of take a look in the mirror, be like, well, there's something, either wrong with me or wrong with this group, or like what's happening, right? And was it something that you just realized on your own, or did you seek some help by mentor? How did that come about for you to like flip that switch?
Yeah, it was just I've always really been into reading and books and motivational stuff, and so I think to be honest with you, I didn't really have a lot of support, you know. Yeah, I had peers and coaches to kind of, you know, chop it up with and talk and voice frustration and whatnot. But a lot of it was kind of my internal desire, my kind of intrinsic motivation to want to get better, you know. And so I really just started diving into as many books as possible. You know, Coach John Wooden, obviously the GOAT, you know, of all GOATs. And he was a massive influence on me. I remember my first team, I actually bought them one of his books. I actually bought every single player a book. And one of the things that helped us in terms of culture was they would bring it to practice every day. And we would just take turns reading different passages from the book. And so he was such a massive influence on the process and the journey, and it's not the destination, it's not the end result. And so that was a really big point, you know, a really big period for me in terms of, I think, establishing my vision and my coaching philosophy, you know, kind of just reading and liking a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then sprinkling a little bit of me. And that's kind of how you do it, right? If you want to get to where you want to get to, you know, you got to be willing to pay that price. And sometimes it's watching movies, and sometimes it's reading books, and sometimes it's going online and looking for the latest article, maybe getting a quote from a coach here or there. And it doesn't even have to be with soccer. I mean, if you go in my office, I've got hundreds and hundreds of articles in sleeves that are all labeled, you know, and it could have anything to do with hockey, baseball, tennis. I mean, but anything and everything under the athletic umbrella, it's all the same. You know what I mean? When it comes to culture and mentality and all that good stuff. So
Yeah, it's true, because we, you know, me personally, I love basketball. I love watching basketball, playing basketball as best as I can. I'm not that great, but I like I like playing, you know, I like playing. I
sure.
like the competition. I like learning. I like the movement, you know, and when I guess you're an athlete, you kind of can play a little bit of everything, right? But it's important as coaches also to kind of learn from other sports, just like you're a, you know, a coach of multiple sports, and it's important to learn those intangibles at times of what coaches are doing, why they're doing it, and more importantly, just be hungry, like you said, to be able to improve. And I think as coaches, we can never be too comfortable, you know, and the games, the sports continue to evolve, and whether it's tactics, whether it's the mental game, whether it's the culture building, things are always kind of moving, and we got to be able to adapt with the times and also stay ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah,
So,
I agree 100%. I think for me personally, you know, being so entrenched in the competitive tennis arena has absolutely 1,000% helped me, you know, because now you're the two. I always get asked, you know, which sport do you like better, right? What sport do you love coaching better? Would it be soccer or tennis? And it's really 1A and 1B. I love the team camaraderie and the dynamic and the intangibles of trying to get more out of less, you know, on the soccer pitch, and the tactical stuff that you can really implement. And I also like the real mental mindset, you know, challenge and opportunity of the tennis, because tennis, it's one-on-one, right? It's me against you, and there's a net separating us, and it's not even about strokes at the end of the day. It's just the ability to unlock your opponent's weakness, right? The ability to find a way, the ability to persevere, the ability to like look inward and be your best when your best is needed. So there's so many different lessons that I think I've learned through both arenas, and they both coincide and work together in terms of helping me become a better coach and a better leader and a better teacher.
Yeah, I agree. And I've never played tennis, but the few times I have, it's pretty difficult. You know, it's pretty difficult because you can't rely on anybody else, you know, especially if you're just playing singles, you know. Doubles is different. But, you know, if you're playing singles, it's really you, and it's physically demanding, mentally demanding. And it's, you know, I've noticed it's pretty tough. So, you know, I think every sport has its own level of respect, you know, and expertise. But what's one thing, of course, what I'm trying to get at is, what's one thing that you've seen is doesn't really change? You know, if you're going to see success as a team or individual, what's one thing or two things you've noticed consistently throughout your teams that you've had, or players that you've coached that you've seen, you know, constant?
From the great ones?
Yeah.
Like the special ones that have gone on to play college and pro and all that.
Yeah. What's one thing they've had?
Humility, I think, and respect. and for me personally, a big part of my culture, whether it's in the team environment, the individual environment, working with clients outside of school, it's respecting the opportunity, right? That the sport has afforded you. It's respecting the time. If you ask any of my students, how many seconds there are in a day, they're going to tell you 86,400 seconds in a day. Why? Because I'm intentional about making sure that, when it's time to train, we're here to train, and let's respect each other's time. I think sometimes that can get lost, especially nowadays. We can touch on social media later when it comes to the culture conversation, but I think it's just such a massive distraction for kids these days, and it's really hard to get them locked in, and it's also really hard to get these kids after a long day of school to come at 3:30, right? 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 to 8. And now all of a sudden you want them to be like firing, and they just got beat up inside the classroom for 6 hours. And so I think there's just a sense of humility. I think the great ones are willing to pay the price. I think everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to talk about winning and this, that, and the other. The great ones are willing to do and endure what it takes to get there. It's easy to use the trigger words. You have a coaches meeting, you have a player meeting. Okay, what are our goals for the season? Oh, I want to win league. Oh, I want to win a CIF championship. Oh, I want to win national cup. I want to win surf cup. And then you ask them, okay, well, what are you willing to do? And then all of a sudden you get them on the line for some fitness, and then you start, and so you're not really, those are kind of fake words. You're kind of doing it because everyone else is saying it. I think the great ones enjoy suffering. I love to use that term because again, it's what are you doing, that your opponent isn't. That's really it at the end of the day, and it can be physical, it can be mental, it can be reading. Right. I'm getting better right now by just reading this book. Right. I'm getting better right now by logging on and checking out this series of Liverpool, whatever. That's how I'm getting better. It doesn't always have to be physical. Right. It doesn't always have to be about technical skill or tactical, elements. It's, I think a lot of it, to be honest with you, starts and stops up here.
Yeah.
That's me personally, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And you start to see that, right? And the intangibles just showing up and having the right attitude, on the field. Do you feel, Travis, that a lot of it comes from the home when it comes to that? Have you noticed that, or is it kind of like a case by case?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, there's something to be said about the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, for sure. It's crazy because I look back and I'm thinking back to some of the ballers that I've had in each of our club teams and high school teams and all of that. And some of my better players that have really gone on to really go to the highest level. I look back on their parents and they're oftentimes the quietest, right? Because they get it. You know what I mean? They get it. Hey, my job is to show up and support, right? And drop little Johnny off or little Nancy off, whatever. And just, my job isn't to berate coaches. My job isn't to berate referees. My job isn't to coach my son or daughter. Like, they trust the process, So I think it is case by case, but, I definitely, in looking back to some of my better players that have gone on, even keeled, don't ever get too high, don't ever get too low, and just allow the coaching and allow the coaches to coach, right? This is what we do, right? This is our profession. We don't go into lawyer offices or doctor offices and tell them how they should be doing their job. And I think it's really hard for parents to kind of separate the two. We can touch on that, later.
Yeah, of course. And my next question for you. So when we're talking about players and environment for them to learn, can you define what a culture is? Like when you think of culture, what does that really mean? That's thrown around often. And what does that mean to you?
For me, God, loaded question, but culture to me is everything. And it's also the hardest thing to establish, right? Because it's not really any one thing. You can't really put your finger on one thing and be like, oh, that's culture. I think culture is attitude. I think culture is collective energy. I think culture is competitive spirit. I think culture is, going from being, selfish to selfless. I think culture consists of, getting away from the singular pronouns, I and me, and transitioning to the plural pronouns, us and we. Those are all little things that, for me personally, that's how I define my culture. Three words that I like to use a lot, and I'm very intentional about using, is connection, moments, and relationships. If I can create an environment where the kids are going to learn about those three things, the success and the winning is going to come as a result, right? Because at the end of the day, for me at least, winning is a byproduct of the process, right? But then to go a step further, the process is a byproduct of your culture that you create, right? And so if you can be intentional and have that singleness of purpose when it comes to doing the best that you can do daily, right? You've got to live it, you've got to breathe it, you've got to eat it, you've got to sleep it as the leader. I think winning honestly just comes as a byproduct. I really do. I think in my 20 plus years of doing this, I don't know if I've ever used the word winning or win before a match, right? And I've been in some big games, you know what I mean? And my kids and my players will tell you, I never talk about winning. I always talk about falling in love with the process, fall in love with the journey. Because the destination, the end result, the winning and losing, you're going to win and you're going to lose and you're going to tie, right? Those are facts. But who you are becoming throughout that process, right? The man that you were becoming, the woman that you were becoming, the teammate that you were becoming, the son, the daughter, the sibling that you were becoming, that's staying power. That's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. And I think it's easy to get fixated on the result. It's easy to get on that hamster wheel and chase it. I got to get bigger. I got to get stronger. We got to do more. For what? So to answer your question, culture for me is kind of a combination of all of those things that accumulate over a period of time, and that's why personally for me that I work in the high school arena, right? So my high school season is like 2 months, 2.5 months, maybe, right? And so think about this. Okay, I'm in charge of the high school girls varsity soccer program. First day of tryouts, right? Okay, we go through our thing, we make our cuts, we've got our 18. Okay, of the 18, I've got 7 freshmen this past year. I've got 7 freshmen. I've got like 3 sophomores. I've got 6 juniors and a couple of seniors. That's a pretty crazy spectrum, right? How do we as a staff, right? How do we get this random group of individuals, some that play club soccer and that want to play at the next level, some that used to play, got burnt out, some that play 2 or 3 sports, volleyball, cross country, track, whatever it is. So you literally only see them for 2 months. How do you get this group to somehow get on the same page, want to like each other, want to eventually love each other, want to play for each other, so you've got to be intentional, a little thing, something that we do on the very first day of every season, is we don't train. I know, right? Everyone's like, yeah, we don't train. We don't do anything we don't do anything involving the ball. We don't do any fitness. We go inside of a classroom. Because for me, again, if I'm going to tell people that this is my vision, right? This is my philosophy. I'm all about culture. I'm all about person before player. I'm all about all these things holistically. Again, I need to live it, right? And so if I'm stressing the importance of team and selflessness and I and me to us and we, then I've got to walk the talk, right? And so the very first day of the winter season, we spend an hour and a half, 2 hours inside of a classroom. And we do a bunch of really cool team building activities and trust exercises, and just get them in the classroom outside of the athletic arena, get them talking, pair up the seniors with the freshmen and the sophomores with the juniors, just get them going, right? And for me personally, that's been part of my blueprint, whether it's tennis or soccer. And that's kind of been part of my code. You know what I mean? And I think it's so important as a coach, who's trying to develop their team. What's your coaching philosophy, right? What's your vision? What do you view as important? And there are a lot of coaches that, they just think culture is supposed to just happen because, right? Well, if you're not intentional and if you're not seeking out the moments to develop and educate them about what you want, and if you think that it's going to happen because they show up on Tuesday and Thursday for a couple of hours and then they show up on Saturday or Sunday, put on a jersey, you're crazy. You know, you're falling way short and you're missing an unbelievable opportunity. So that's just kind of one example of what I try to do with my teams when it comes to, you know, really instilling, you know, the importance, you know. And another thing that we do is at our parent meetings, one of the first things that I like to tell everybody in the room is that winning is not that important to me. And again, it elicits that same response of, well, I thought you compete to win, right? And then I explain what that means. I go into the layers about how winning and losing will be a byproduct, right, of focusing on the process, will be a byproduct of your kids buying in and investing. Because, you know, I think there's already so much pressure and there's so many expectations that these kids feel, whether it's from mom and dad, whether it's from their peer group, whether it's from their siblings, whether it's inside the classroom. And so, you know, the more that you talk about winning, oh, we gotta beat this team. You know, if we beat them, then right, the more you do that type of stuff, now you're building it up to be bigger than it is, right? And these kids who already have a lot going on, you know, it's like paralysis by overanalysis. You know, you don't want to give them too much information because then they're just going to shut down because they're going to be thinking the whole time, right? And the beautiful part of the game of soccer is that it's a player's game, right? And it's a feel. You want them feeling. You don't want them reacting. You want them feeling. You want it to be in the flow. You know what I mean? And so those are things that we spend a lot of time, you know, talking about for sure.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because if you don't do all those little things, like you're saying, right? All the intangibles, like just showing up, being a good teammate. Like John Wooden says, even as simple as knowing how to tie your shoelaces, right?
Best every day, right? The beginning of every season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly. If you don't do all those little things and just being like we're talking about, being a good teammate, showing up on time, having each other's back, you know, being respectful of your opponent, even little things like that, they go a long way, right? They go a long way, and it is part of building that culture within that team, and everybody has to buy in, right? And so what exercises can you or do you do at you know, if you can name one or two that help start that process, you know, when you start the season?
Well, I think I'll go into exercises in a second. I just want to interject real quick and add, I think empowering your player is a massive part of this culture. You know, I came up with kind of a little, whatever equation, if you will. I ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions of my players because number one, it's very important for me to make sure that they realize that this is not a dictatorship, you know, and I think a lot of coaches kind of get off with the power that they have maybe as the head coach, right? And so they take advantage and they abuse it. For me, this is not even about me, right? The next 2.5 months, Walter, it's about you and your boys, right? What do you guys want to get out of this? You know, how good do you guys want to be? How hard do you want to be pushed, right? What are some of your goals, short-term, long-term? I ask a lot of questions because what I've found is that questions, I want my players to be active participants, right? Because in a game, once a game starts, there's only so much we can do as coaches, right? They got to figure their stuff out, you know? And so for me, it's how do I teach them how to be active participants without making them aware of it almost, right? So like the whole psychology aspect of it. So I ask a lot of questions because asking questions will then get them to participate and give responses, okay? Once they start giving responses and they're actively participating, now all of a sudden they start feeling valued, right? And once they start feeling valued, well, now I'm going to hold myself a little bit more accountable because I'm invested, right? And then once they start holding themselves accountable, well, guess what? The next step is ownership. Wow, this is really our journey. You know, wow, T wasn't just, this is, so by asking a lot of questions, right, you empower your kids to think for themselves, number one, which again is another life lesson that you want to hopefully instill in them early. And you get them to participate. And the more that they start participating and engaging, the more accountability that they start feeling, and the more sense of, accountability, and the more ownership that they start taking of their journey. So that's one thing that I'm intentional about doing. Every day I'm asking questions. Throughout practices, I'm asking questions. After games, I'm asking questions, because I really want them to feel that this is not TK's show. It's all about TK for the next 2.5 months. It's really not. It's about me and my staff creating an environment for them to flourish and learn a lot about themselves. But in terms of exercises, another loaded question. I'll share a couple of things. I challenge myself, like you mentioned earlier, is what's your intrinsic motivation to get better as a coach, right? As a leader, you've got to evolve, you've got to adapt, you've got to kind of adjust to your audience. And so for me, every season, I try to kind of come up with a new theme, if you will, or kind of just a new mantra, right? So Coach Wooden, you're a big fan of Coach. I actually had the pleasure of meeting him. I'll share that story later with you. But the pyramid of success, right? Everybody knows it. It's unbelievable. 15 building blocks, right? What he thinks gets to the competitive greatness block at the top. So one year, our girls varsity tennis program, again, one of the first days of season, one inside of the classroom. I broke them up. I think we had 12 girls. So I broke them up into 4 groups of 3. Okay. They each walked into a room, and I made sure to break up the groups. So we have 4 groups of 3. Each group got a clipboard with the original pyramid of success on it, some extra paper, and a pen. And they had about 15 to 20 minutes. Go outside, stay inside, just go be with your group, right? Go be with your other 2 girls. Look it over, think about what you like and what you want your pyramid. What do you want our pyramid of success to be? Okay, so I give them 15, 20 minutes to do that, bring them back in. And now we're kind of doing like a, socialization, public speaking exercise. Each group then has to get up front of the classroom and present their pyramid of success. What are their 15 building blocks that they deem, super important, and this is what they feel like this is what we want our identity to be. So each one goes up on a dry erase board. They draw out their pyramid of success, explain what each block means, all that good stuff. So now we've got 4 different pyramids, right, made up of 15 different blocks. So we sit down. We then discuss each block, and then we vote, because again, it's not us. It's not the coaches, it's the players. Okay. Well, hey, I really like this. I really like this. Okay, cool. Once we vote and we come up with our 15 blocks. Okay. Well, now what's your base, right? How are you building up? What's the top block going to be, and so it was an unbelievable experience. Once we came up with our final pyramid, I took a picture, gave the artwork to a couple of the girls who are so they're just so tech savvy these days. Within 2 days, they gave it to me on like a little USB flash drive. I went to Kinko's, printed it out on some nice cardboard paper, and they had created their own pyramid of success and kind of formed what they want their identity to be for the year. In my 20 plus years, that fall tennis season probably was up there with the best of them, and we didn't win anything. Again, we didn't win a league title. We didn't challenge for a CIF banner. We didn't have anybody that played outside of school. We didn't have any nationally ranked players, but in terms of culture, in terms of dynamic, in terms of all 12 girls are in, it was unbelievable. So that was kind of a theme and outside the box thing that we do. I actually brought a couple things to show you, buddy. A few years ago, I had a player who was a senior tennis player, and have since used this with my soccer programs and tennis programs. That's a keychain, right? Boxing glove. And I had a talk with one of my girls, and she was a good little player, but I just felt that she didn't have that like want to, she wasn't winning and losing. She was okay with either one. It didn't really bother her, right? She wins 6-2, awesome. She loses 0-6, awesome. And she had a nice little base. She was a good little player, right? And it's her senior year. And I'm like, God, how do we get this girl to become more of a competitor, more of a fighter? And I went home after practice and I'm like, fighter, okay, boxing glove. And I Googled, small boxing glove keychains. And I decided that the theme for the season was going to be, this and what it meant to them. So again, something tangible, right, elicits words, which then elicit thoughts, which then conjure up emotion, which then leads to feelings, which then leads to connection, right? So again, it's this domino effect. So I show up like a week later, right? I go on Amazon, ordered a ton of these things, and they got delivered. And they showed up, and I dropped the bag. And I'm like, go ahead and take one. And they're like, right? And then we had a conversation. I asked them in a small circle, I said, hey, what are some of the first things that come to your mind when you think about a boxing glove? Oh, fight, getting back up, adversity, resilience, all these great trigger words, right? Which really kind of embody everything great about competition, right? And so each of them ended up taking one of these. I think we had gold, white, red, and black, and gray, and they put it on their tennis bag. So everywhere they went for the next 2.5 months, right, they would each have a little boxing glove. And something so small ended up being so significant, right? Because every time they looked at this, it brought them back, right? And so I brought this out this past season with our soccer program and did something a little bit different. At the end of every game, the coaches and some of the players would nominate a player or two that they felt earned the boxing glove, that they felt showed the most fight, the most grit. And so, by the end of the season, you've got some girls that have, a bunch of these. And again, it's something so small, right? I mean, but yet it's so significant because kids, high school, college, pros, I mean, they're always thinking outside the box, right? As coaches, how can I get better? How can I galvanize this group? And so by doing little tangible things like this, it's also ownership. It's also teaches accountability, and it's also a reward system. And then it also, in a weird way, it kind of creates a cool little competitive, right? I want one, right? Hey, I'm tired of seeing Walter get one. I want one. What do I need to do to get one? And so those are a couple things that we do. I will share one last thing with you.
Go ahead. Yeah, of course. We're so good. So I'm over here like taking mental notes and like saying, all right, how can I use this?
We'll get lunch soon, Walter. I told you. You'll buy me a sandwich.
Yeah, I got you. Don't worry about that. I got you.
So this past year for our boys tennis season, which unfortunately got cut short, right, due to the virus, we just had a special group this year. We started the season off on fire, and they were like, I think 8-0. We went up to our normal tournament up in Fresno. That's another thing that I try to do. I try to do some overnights as often as possible in the beginning of the season, get them away from everyone and just hanging out with themselves. So we just got back from Fresno when kind of the school shut down and everything else. And the very first day of practice, I brought kind of a handful of matches out. And I'd been thinking again, right, outside the box, challenging myself to get better. Hey, what am I going to use this season, right? How can I, let's see, what do you think? Okay, you know what? Flame, right? A mighty flame once started as a spark, right? A mighty flame follows a tiny spark. And then also the idea of team, right? Being a good teammate, respecting your teammate, working for your teammate, tackling back for your teammate, all this good stuff. So watch what happens, okay? Watch what happens when I light one match. Okay, you guys all see the flame? You see it?
Yeah.
Now watch what happens when I join the lit flame with the unlit flame. Watch what happens to this flame. So the idea behind that right there is it's impossible for you not to get better when you're helping your teammate, right? Look what happened to the flame. As soon as I joined, right? So it's just getting the idea of, number one, it only takes a spark to create that flame. So why can't you be the spark? Why can't you be the spark? Why can't you be the spark? It doesn't always have to be the best players, right? It doesn't have to be physical. It could be mental. It can be psychological. It could be verbal. It can be, you could be the loudest player on the bench and you could provide your team with that spark, right? And then also just the idea of, as soon as this happens and it does this, it just permeates throughout the rest of the team. So that's kind of, I don't know. I think a lot of people are visual.
That's awesome. And you just, I'm trying to get into your head. Do you just like sit, or how do you come up with these ideas? Is it like when you're driving, when you're showering, when you're meditating? Like how do these ideas just come?
I just, I think I'm very fortunate because I love what I do.
Yeah.
That's it. I love what I do. So I'm consumed by it. Now look, sometimes me being consumed by always trying to get better and always wanting to do more and always wanting to provide and be creative, that takes its toll on other areas of my life. Right. And so in the past, some relationships have kind of fallen short because it's always been about me and my kids, because I consider myself so fortunate. Every single day I get to wake up and do what I love to do. Every single day, my cup gets filled by the culture of connection, by creating moments, by forging relationships, and so I spent a lot of time, trying to practice mindfulness. I try and surf a bit as well, which is awesome in terms of headspace. Again, reading a lot. I write a lot, trying to create this whole consulting kind of business of mine, right, where I'm mentoring coaches and helping bring them along, as well as working with players. So a lot of it is just, honestly, it's just a combination of a lot of little things. I've got so many, napkins with just random notes or quotes or lines, and I'll start writing on my phone. You know what I mean? I used to drive around, Walter, with a video cassette, old school video cassette. I would get on the road and I would just hit record and I would just start talking. So it would just be a self journal. And then later on, maybe a week later, I can go back, push play and go through it and reflect. So I'm always thinking about just different ways, because again, everything is about evolving and trying to, reinvent the wheel, and I've been doing this for 20 plus years. So in some ways it's kind of like, oh, you've got the blueprint, just do your thing, right? Rest on your laurels to some extent, but I'm just not wired like that. I think once I get tired of trying to be creative, once I get tired of these types of things and whatnot, I think that's when it's time for me to kind of transition out of the athletic arena as a coach. But people, I get that all the time. When are you going to just do the admin thing, or what do you, I still love it. I still love the day to day, and more importantly, I love connecting with the kids. That's been my greatest gift, that I've been given, is the ability to create this environment and then the ability to live it, and so those are just a few themes that I've used. Bamboo. I've used bamboo a lot. I've had my tennis players walk around school carrying a bamboo stick. And then a few days later, they've got to give it to the next guy. And then we talk about all the different lessons that bamboo teaches us, you know what I mean? About life and competition. So I'm pretty zen-y like that as well. Hold the rope, which I'm sure, everybody's heard of. Sandpaper. I've done things where, I've given players a piece of sandpaper and I've had them hold it and touch it and feel it and then talk about it. And okay, what does it feel like? Oh, it feels gritty. It feels coarse. It feels hard. It feels rough. Okay, what does the other side feel like? And so the yin yang, the season is going to be gritty, right? The next 2.5 months are going to be tough, and so little details like that, anything and everything that I can think of, I feel like I owe it to them. If I'm asking them to become the best, if I'm asking them to give everything, I've got to be willing to do it myself, and so this is me trying to do a little bit extra, making their season maybe a little bit different than others.
Definitely can relate, and it's excellent to hear these techniques and to hear how hungry you are and how much pleasure it is, just being a coach and being someone that someone wants to look up to and someone wants to learn from. I think that's something very important. And it kind of, just like you said, it's something with the right coach that's really going to impact lives on and off the field or on and off the court. You all constantly got to be looking at how you can improve yourself, just like you ask your players, your teams to improve, just like you said it. You also got to be willing to meet them halfway, but also put in the work so that they see, oh yeah, coach is also, meeting us halfway. He or she's just not saying it, and their body language, their tone of their voice, the way they run sessions, it doesn't correlate to how we're supposed to perform as a team.
It's crazy, right? We are always under this scope.
Yeah.
Right. And the kids are smart, right? And they're intuitive and they pick up on everything. So again, the whole going back to the culture is you've got to be intentional about living it every single day, because if you show up a little bit late, or maybe, I show up and you show up to practice and the first set of cones and everything's not lined up, right? Everything's not out. The ball, I got to pump up balls for the first 5 minutes of practice. I got to set up the cone. Like those are all little details that affect the rest of your session, right? And kids notice that, right? Kids can tell if you're in a good place, if you're in a good mood, how's your energy level, if you're just out here, okay, looking at, I got to get by the next hour and a half. I have to, I don't get to. Again, that whole psychological shift, it applies to the coaches as well, right? Oh, I gotta head to practice now. No, I get to. You know what I mean? You don't have to do anything. It's a choice.
Yeah.
I think by really being intentional about being the best version of you, I think Dabo Sweeney said it best a few years ago, coaching at Clemson before, I think, the national championship game or the semifinal game. Afterwards, he told his guys something along the lines of like, be the best version of you so that we can be the best version of us. Think about that, right? Just Walter, you just be the best version of Walter. You don't have to worry about being like Fabian or Greggy Falk or Chris Estes, right? You just be the best Walter, right? And then let Chris be the best Chris. And that'll give us a chance to become the best us, right? And so as coaches and leaders and teachers, we're a part of us. We're a big part of us. So we better make sure that, again, we're walking the talk, because otherwise we're contradicting ourselves. And that's when you start running into problems, I think,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to kind of transition into, advice when it comes to culture for parents. What advice would you give to parents if they're in, a culture where they see it's just, even though they're part of a big club supposedly, and they want to go for more of the name, how important is it to find the right culture for your kids?
It's so funny that you asked that question. I had a high school player this past year, really good player, special player, could absolutely play at the next level. He was at one of the bigger clubs, playing on the second or third team, was never getting called up, was never getting looked at, was never getting offered a place to go train with the academy or anything. And he was in my office 2 years ago. So I think he was a junior, and we're talking about club and this, that, and the other. How's your team? Who's coaching you? It's, why are you there? Why are you still there if it's just, well, it's, he throws out the name. It's one of the big clubs in the Valley, right? That has the name and the status and the title. And I said, let me talk to you about a few things. Sorry, real quick. You need to put yourself in an environment where you're being challenged. You need to put yourself in an environment where you're having fun. You need to put yourself in an environment where you respect the coach, and how they run their training sessions. I said, don't get so caught up with the name, because I'm pretty sure the name hasn't gotten you a tryout with the first team. I'm pretty sure the name isn't having you train with the first team, every other week or whatever it is. I'm pretty sure the name, isn't meeting a lot of these psychological needs as well, right? And so for you to stay there just because you think that it gives you more credibility, or it's all ego, right? I think at the end of the day. So for parents, and I've been fortunate to be at both smaller and bigger, and I think for me, it's about finding the right fit. no different than, seniors applying to college, right? You've got your bigger schools, the sexy names, they're on national television, everybody knows them, right? But there are so many other unbelievable university and colleges, right, where you can get an unbelievable experience, right? But what happens, especially in today, is that we're so consumed with the title and the ego aspect of it that, you get families that are willing to just stay, because they think at some point it's going to change. And so I just, I think, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, bigger is not always better. I think sometimes, what starts small and become big, yeah, you're looking at quantity. Okay, awesome, thumbs up, right? Maybe more revenue, maybe, more facilities, whatever. I can get a contract with this, whatever it is. But unless you've got great leadership, unless you have intentional leadership, you're going to lose your sense of self in the process of getting bigger, right? And so, like I was telling you, you're at what, 12 or 13 teams. I'm like, man, that's a good number, because you're still small enough where you got your thumbprint. You know all of your coaches. You know most of your players probably by first name, and as a director, as the guy that created this club, there's value in that. There's tremendous value in that. Now, that value for some is going to be different than others, right? But in terms of any advice that I, have for the current club parent, and I talk to them all the time, because they're always asking me, oh, should I go to this club? Should I go to this club? Number one, be patient. Number two, trust the process. You don't want to get that reputation. And this, right? Because there were kids in our age bracket growing up. They're floating every 6 months, every year, he's on a new team. That doesn't speak volumes. That doesn't bode well for you moving forward. That's a red flag, right? And it's a small soccer community, and all the coaches know each other, right? And so all it takes is a phone call. Hey, Walter, dude, just giving you a heads up. Yeah, he's a good player, but hey, listen, parents are. So just be aware and make sure that, I think you support your kid unconditionally, and kind of allow them, they're smart, they get it. They know, they're aware, allow them, this is their process. Yes, you're paying and you're driving. And so you're absolutely a big piece of it. But at the end of the day, this is really about your son, or if this is really about your daughter, then communicate with them and find out kind of where they want to be. And the biggest thing is why, right? Get to the why aspect. Once you figure out the why, you can deal with any how. You know what I mean? That would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. And I hope that parents that are listening, and even the players, they can definitely take a lot from that, because at times it just comes down to the right culture. Like, so we've been saying this whole time here. It just comes down to the right environment, the right culture, the right coaching, the right players around you. Everything just needs to feel right, And when you find that, like, why am I going to go anywhere else? Like, it doesn't make sense.
And I think people now also are chasing, obviously before the academy fell out, right? Everybody was chasing the academy because they just assumed that if they played academy, they were going to be guaranteed a scholarship and this, that, and the other, right? And academy is the end all be all. Well, what happened a few years ago when some of the bigger clubs dropped out of academy, especially on the girls' side, right? Because their high school girls wanted to play high school, right? So a lot of big time clubs a year or two ago, I think Slammers and whatnot, PDA, Michigan, they all said later to the academy idea, because their parents and families spoke up and they were heard. And so there's a lot of, I think there's something to be said about, of course, wanting to play at the highest level, whatever that level is. But you also have to be realistic. Would you rather be on an academy team and not really play and be a good practice player? Or would you rather be playing on like a Coast Premier team and playing every minute? That's how you get better, right? You get better by playing. You don't get better by sitting on the bench, but again, I think just parents need to kind of remove the ego aspect of it, remove that status, my son or my daughter plays here. Okay, great. It sounds great for like all of 30 seconds, right? And then once that conversation is over, guess what? The person that you were telling probably forgot, right? Yeah. So I just think for parents, it's just, empower your kids, empower your
Yeah.
kids as much as you can, as early as you can,
Yeah.
because if you push too much, you're going to end up breaking them. They're going to end up resenting it. They're going to end up quitting. They're going to end up hating it. And as you know, man, all it takes is one bad experience, right? For a player to be totally shut down,
And especially at the younger ages where it's like, sometimes they come to you, it happens often here at our club where the kids are playing for the first time, and what do you remember? Anything, like if you ever had a great teacher in school, right? And doesn't matter if it was a subject you liked or didn't like, right? You didn't know any better, right? I have to take chemistry, right? If you had a great chemistry teacher, you're going to learn to kind of love that subject, right? Or at least take something from it. Same thing with English, and same thing with soccer, let's say, or sports. If you come into an environment and come across a coach, right, and you have that, you're able to leave a memorable experience and make sure they come back, you've done your job.
100%.
Right? You've done your job.
100%.
So last question, advice for like coaches on building culture. Like, what advice would you give to them that is like, they don't know where to start, or they're trying to change things? Like, what advice would you give to them for somebody that wants to start doing something similar?
Take some time to come up with your coaching philosophy. I think it starts with you, right? The leader. It starts with you, the person who's in charge, the teacher. And if you don't know what you want this to be, it's going to be really hard for you to convey anything to your kids or your parents. So I think step one is to really think about kind of, who are you as a leader? Who are you as kind of a mentor? And as a coach, if you do it right, you're wearing like 18 different hats. You know what I mean? And I've always said this: soccer is easy. Soccer to me, it's boring. Tennis, the sport, is boring. The physical aspect is boring to me. And it sounds crazy. What excites me is trying to build and trying to create, because how do you get better at anything? Just by repetition, right? So if you want to get better on the ball, if you want to get better technically, then just touch the ball, right? But what I found when it comes to culture, why a lot of coaches maybe don't spend a lot of time on it, is number one, maybe it wasn't a big thing as part of their development, right? It wasn't around, or their coach didn't really emphasize it. Number two, maybe they never really thought it was a big deal, and they just simply don't know a lot about it, right? There are some coaches that are just not wired to delve into that aspect or the mentality aspect, right? You get coached to develop soccer players, right? But for me, I view it as I'm getting paid to develop people first, players second. Because once you reach the person, the player will follow. It's not the other way around. And a lot of coaches have a hard time with that because they think it's just player. I can drive Walter, just drive more, bigger, stronger, faster, right? But unless you kind of learn that you've got to have that balancing act, you've got to be able to ask questions, get to know your players. For me, I surf with them. Back in the day with those guys from Valley United, I used to go to Taft High School and skateboard with them. I remember Pete Carroll, when he was at SC, reading an article, how he purposely would take his guys as far away from the football field as possible. They'd go to Manhattan Beach to go watch one of like the ATP volleyball tournaments and just be around these guys and let these guys be around each other outside of their natural habitat. Right. And what you see, the relationships and how they treat each other and how they talk to each other, and they come back and they're so much closer as a result. I think sometimes, I'm a big believer in less is more, but again, going back to a novice coach who maybe just got done playing and he's transitioning into coaching, figuring out his coaching style, which I think comes in time, right? You kind of have to go through it, right? To kind of get it. But again, starting with your vision. What's your vision? What do you foresee the next 6 months? What do you want it to be? Right. And then just educate yourself, be a self-starter. Great leaders are readers. You know what I mean? They dive into books and they can never get enough because they're constantly, trying to evolve and get better. And let's be honest, all of these leadership books, very similar messages, right? Yeah. Maybe a little bit of a different anecdote here or a few words changed here, but it's all kind of the same. You know what I mean? Servant leadership, culture, team building, sacrifice, all this good stuff. But yeah, pursue your passion, ask questions. I think a lot of younger coaches, maybe there's a pride and there's an ego aspect. Oh, I played here, so I know. Playing and coaching, right? Yeah.
There's two different things.
Competing and leading. You see a lot of coaches who are great trainers, but guess what? They don't know how to communicate with parents. They don't want to have anything to do with parents. Well, guess what? Those parents that you don't want to communicate with are why you have a job. So you better get comfortable being uncomfortable. You better learn how to start talking to parents. You better start learning how to have those uncomfortable conversations with parents, because they're the reason why you have a job. I never understood that. Now the reality of today's world is sometimes parents, right, they can cross that line. And so as a coach, you definitely get hardened. I used to be so much different than I am now as a result of going through some of those tough experiences, right? And so as you get older, it hardens you, because you realize that at the end of the day, a lot of the parents are great as long as their kid is doing what they want them to be doing, and there are very few parents that are just so selfless and so absorbed in the team and the community that they show up and they're stoked to be a part of it. A lot of parents now, I'm stoked to be a part of it as long as my son or daughter is getting the minutes that I feel like they should. Because once that stops, guess what? Phone calls, text messages. Yeah, and then all of a sudden yeah. So I would just, again, recommend for the younger coaches and follow your passion, and just continue to be a student, forever a student.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. I know you're starting your new journey now into your mentoring and your programs that you're creating for coaches and even players. So tell us a little bit more about that and what's coming for you.
Yeah, it's been, I've been working on, this has kind of been building for the last 20 plus years, ever since that first team that did battle against you guys, at U11. It's kind of what started as a vision and a philosophy, which for me has been life over sport. And at the end of the day, life over sport, it has nothing to do with what you're doing. It has everything to do with the person you're becoming while doing it. So again, right, the idea of winning and losing. Winning is so fleeting. Anybody who's won anything will tell you it comes and it goes. And all this build up for the championship game. And once you win it and once it's over, great, you celebrate for a little bit. And guess what? The sun sets, and a handful of hours later, the sun will rise and it's a new day, right? The world doesn't stop because you win anything. And so the idea behind the whole life over sport is just understanding that it has very little to do with the actual sport. And it could be life over anything. It could be life over music. It has nothing to do with the instrument that you're playing. It has everything to do with the person that you're becoming, the life lessons that you're learning throughout the process of what you're doing, not the end result, and that's also really hard to do, right? Is get these kids and get these parents to be obsessed with the journey, to fall in love with the process, not just the end product. The end product, guess what? At the end of the day, there can only be one, right? There can only be one national champion. There can only be one CIF champion. There can only be one NCAA champion. So you're talking about of the hundreds and thousands of teams. If you don't finish first, right? If you don't win your last game of the season, then what? It's a failure. You know what I mean? And so really instilling them to understand, to just invest in the unknown, and fall in love with the process. Person before player is a massive mantra for me. Like I said earlier, it's always going to be about who you are as a person instead of what you can do for me, in the inside of the arena. I will always care more about the person before the player. And again, once that stops, it's time for me to kind of get out. Once I become so fixated on the winning and the results, and I've been there, I've lost myself, as we all do. We can get caught up in the chase. But I think it's important as coaches to be able to look inward and really kind of assess and evaluate, and kind of figure out every 6 months, every 12 months, kind of where you are, where you were, and where you want to be, Yeah. And so I do a little bit of consulting now with coaches, and I've worked with some teams in the past in terms of running sessions and talking about things like, the matches and the boxing gloves and themes. And I just love creating, and then I also work with kids outside of school, on the whole mental aspect of competition, which is just a whole other can of worms, is just how do I, how can I get out of my own way? You know what I mean? How can I understand that the mind and the body are supposed to work together? They're not supposed to do this. They're supposed to do this. And a lot of the times, the kid's inability to be present, right here, right now, is what affects their ability, to become the best version of themselves. So I spent a lot of time with some college athletes and pro athletes and high level junior athletes on just kind of, hey, let's dive into this book and let's talk about it. Or I'm going to print out an article. I want you to highlight what's important. And then I want you to write a few things based off of your highlights. And then let's talk about it. I've got kids who will journal, right? They'll Google Doc me an entry after a tennis match, right? Let's say it was down in whatever, Pasadena, Orange County. I couldn't watch them. They'll come home. They'll write a little, self-assessment about how they performed, good, bad, and different. And it just stays between us. They'll send it my way. I'll look it over. I'll highlight a few trigger words or phrases and then go back and forth. So just doing a lot of cool things like that. I am, again, I think I've been obsessed and very fortunate, to kind of be able to do what I love to do. And I think for me, paying it forward and helping others get better and helping others, introducing others to some of these themes, sharing my blueprint basically, right? Because it's worked, every level that I've been at, whether it's youth, whether it's high school, whether it's club. I've been very fortunate to be a part of a lot of special teams that have gone on to do a lot of special things. But what's remained consistent, what's been the common denominator behind all of those teams and programs and players has been the blueprint of using the whole life over sport, person before player. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And how can people connect with you? I know you just your own Instagram, for the first time ever. But is there a website coming? How can people reach out to learn more and possibly?
Yeah, we're working on the website. I have a really hard time with social media and kind of self-promoting. I really, I always refer to myself as like Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid. I just kind of like doing my thing. You know what I mean? I really enjoy it, kind of being low key and under the radar, and creating what I do with who I do it with. And so this whole world of self-promotion and getting yourself out there, I've resisted it for quite some time, but I think I'm slowly turning that corner. And just for me, it's how can I affect the masses? You know what I mean? How can I get out there? How can I share my message? How can I share my vision with others? And so I started an Instagram account. You are correct. It's just Travis Kikugawa. Website definitely is going to be up soon, I think. And we'll just kind of take it day by day. I'm in a good place right now. I'm so fortunate to be able to do what I love doing at an unbelievable academic institution, and so fortunate to have contacts like Willie to put me in touch with you. And still am very close with a handful of coaches from back in the day. So I still am very much involved, even though I'm not directly involved, kind of more consultant type of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're going to find a lot of either parents, players, coaches definitely reach out now that you are out in the social media world, to stay connected. And we'll be sure to connect your account to our audience here, because I think they'll find a lot of value just working with you, speaking with you, and possibly just getting to know, what's in your head, because I feel like what you have to offer is much, much needed. Like you say, it's more than just the sport, it's life over sport. And at times clubs, coaches, parents, they kind of forget that, and it's key. So lastly, I just want to go ahead and thank you, Travis, for being on, your time, for being flexible with your schedule, and it was definitely a great interview, and definitely we'll be posting it on YouTube so everybody can take a look and share. But lastly, what book or books would you recommend, to our audience?
Oh man, another loaded question. Anything related to Coach Wooden is gold. I think I have every single one of his books, to be honest with you. So anything regarding Coach Wooden, it's just man, I cannot speak highly enough about who he is, you know what I mean? And the influence that he's had on so many people, you know. He was always a teacher first, you know, he always taught in the classroom first, and then obviously got into the whole basketball arena. So anything Coach Wooden, I'm a big guy on culture, obviously, and there's a great book called Legacy. Forgot the author's name, last name is Kerr, but it's on the New Zealand rugby team, the All Blacks. Yeah, exactly, right? The haka dance.
Yeah.
I think they're like sporting's most successful professional organization in terms of their winning percentage. But the book is just all about how they created and what their culture looks like from the inside out. So that's fantastic. Ryan Holiday has been a good guy. You know, he's got a couple of really good books out that I've read and used and kind of given out to some of the clients that I work with. The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy. John Maxwell has a ton of good stuff out there on leadership and all that other good stuff. Life Reading, Tuesdays with Maury. If you haven't read it and you're a coach, read it. It's an unbelievable life book. I've probably in the last couple of years, I've single-handedly probably purchased like 12 copies, because I always end up giving them away either for graduation gifts or kids will ask me, hey, TK, dude, I'm going on a trip this summer. I need something to read. Talk to me. Tuesdays with Maury has nothing to do with sport. It's a life perspective book. It's unbelievable. And really it depends on what your, you know, specific interest is. You know, I'm into the whole Zen. So Phil Jackson, his approach, Bruce Lee, his philosophy about water and flowing and adapting. So there's just, I've got a million books in my success library, but those are probably a handful that I would recommend to start.
Awesome.
But I think Coach Wooden for sure would be my first go-to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And once again, thank you for being flexible and sharing your time with us, your expertise. Hopefully everybody that's watching learned a ton. And I think it's going to be great learning a little bit more about your program and your website once it comes up. We'll definitely try to reconnect and do this again once your website's up.
For sure.
Right. Thank you again. Much appreciated.
All right, buddy. Be good.
Thank you. Bye.